The I-35 highway cut through the Texas darkness like a scar of asphalt. It was 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, or at least it should have been. The interstate bus pushed heavily down the road, its headlights piercing the fog rising from the damp ground. Inside, 52 passengers pretended to sleep, rocked by the rumble of the diesel engine. But something was wrong. At mile marker 237, right near the border between Texas and Oklahoma, 3 unmarked vehicles appeared out of nowhere. 2 cars and a pickup truck blocked the highway with military precision. The bus driver, a 52-year-old man named Derek, slammed on the brakes. The screech of tires tore through the silence of the night. "What the hell?" he muttered, hands gripping the wheel. From the back seat, a passenger in a black cap and plain jacket shifted in his seat. His trained eyes had already counted. 7 men getting out of the vehicles, all armed, all carrying themselves with the posture of men who had done this before. The bus door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The first man to board had his face covered with a red bandana. In his hands, an assault rifle that gleamed under the interior lighting. Behind him, 3 more, all wearing the colors that identified their gang, MS-13. "Nobody moves!" the leader screamed, his voice echoing through the narrow aisle. "Phones, wallets, jewelry, everything on the floor, now!" Terror set in. Women began to cry. Children clung to their mothers. An elderly man tried to hide his wedding ring, but stopped when he saw the gun barrel pointed at his face. The man in the black cap at the back of the bus remained perfectly still. His fingers brushed lightly against his waist, where beneath his jacket rested something these criminals didn't yet know existed. He glanced discreetly to his left. 3 rows ahead, a woman with short hair gave an almost imperceptible nod. Then another person, and another, and another. 50 undercover law enforcement officers, all armed, all on a mission, and the MS-13 members had absolutely no idea what kind of deadly trap they had just walked into. What would happen in the next 15 minutes would change the history of law enforcement operations in the United States forever. But before we find out how this ambush became one of the greatest reversals ever recorded, CTA-1. If you want to understand how 50 officers managed to blend into that bus without raising a single red flag, and how this operation almost ended in tragedy, subscribe to the Shadows and Redemption channel and hit the notification bell, because what you're about to hear has never been told this way. Let's go. To understand how 50 federal agents ended up on that bus, we need to go back 3 weeks. The FBI's organized crime task force in San Antonio had intercepted a communication, not just any communication, but a coded exchange between high-ranking MS-13 members. Special Agent Richard Mendez, a veteran with 28 years in the Bureau, was in his office when the intelligence came in. Salt and pepper hair, deep circles under his eyes, and a reputation for never letting a case go cold. He listened to the recording 3 times. "They're planning a series of hits on I-35, he told his team, replaying the audio. "This isn't random robbery. It's a power move. They want to show they control the federal highways." Sergeant Patricia Oliver, 34 years old, one of the best sharpshooters in the Bureau, crossed her arms. "How many targets?" she asked, her voice steady. 6 interstate buses over the next 30 days, Mendez replied. "Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Same stretch every time. They've studied the routes. They know when. Surveillance is thinnest." Investigator Paul Henderson, a specialist in undercover operations with 7 successful missions under his belt, leaned over the table. "If we bring in marked vehicles, they'll spot us miles away. MS-13 has lookouts all along that highway. We can't run a conventional operation." That was the moment Operation Ghost Passenger was born. The idea was simple in theory, but extraordinarily complex in execution. Embed undercover officers into interstate buses running the exact route identified in the intercepts. No patrol, cars, no radio communications, just agents with concealed weapons, false IDs, and a single order: wait. For 17 days, nothing happened. Different teams boarded in rotating shifts. 18, 22, sometimes 30 officers per bus, Always on overnight runs, always vigilant. But on the night of November 22nd, intelligence picked up a new audio message. The attack was happening that night. Time: between 3 and 4 a.m. Target: a Lone Star Express bus departing Dallas at 11 p.m., heading to Oklahoma City. Agent Mendez didn't hesitate. "Mobilize, everyone. I want 50 officers on that bus." 50? Patricia pushed back. "Richard, that's too much of a risk. If something goes wrong, we'll have the firepower to respond." Mendez cut in. "But if we're not there, 7, 8, maybe 10 families are going to suffer tonight. Children will watch their mothers get threatened. Elderly people will hand over a lifetime of savings. I won't allow it." At 8 p.m., 50 FBI agents and state law enforcement officers gathered in a discreet hangar. They were issued civilian clothing: jeans, t-shirts, jackets, false IDs, compact concealable weapons, thin bulletproof vests that wouldn't show under street clothes. Officer Fernanda Santos, 29 years old, specialized in urban combat, checked her .40 caliber pistol for the 5th time. "First time I'm going on a mission pretending to be a tourist," she joked, but her tone was razor sharp with focus. "Listen up," Mendez said, standing before the group. "You are ordinary passengers until the moment of identification. Do not react before the signal. Agent Henderson will give the command. When he says documents, that's the code word. That's when you neutralize the threat." Paul Henderson nodded. He would be the passenger in the back, the primary observer. His strategic position would let him assess the entire length of the bus. At 11 p.m. sharp, 52 passengers boarded the Lone Star Express. 2 were real civilians who had no idea what was about to unfold. 50 were federal and state law enforcement officers, and among them, the fate of one of the boldest operations in American law enforcement history. Now, as those 7 MS-13 members invaded the bus, convinced they were about to have an easy night of terror and profit, the real question hung in the air. How would 50 officers disarm 7 gang members in a confined space without a bloodbath? The leader of the MS-13 crew, known on the streets as Jackal, moved down the center aisle. His AR-style rifle swung left and right. Behind him, his partner Big Mike held a 12-gauge shotgun. 2 others, Pitbull and Renato, covered the rear. "I said phones on the floor," Jackal bellowed again, kicking the bag of a woman who was half a second too slow. A child of about 7 started crying. Her mother pulled her close, hands trembling, and slowly took her phone from her bag. Officer Marcus Rivera, seat 17. 26 years old, 3 years on the force, first major operation, watched every move. His heart pounded like a war drum. His right hand brushed the weapon hidden under his shirt. Not yet, he thought. Wait for the signal. "You," Jackal pointed at a heavy-set man in a Hawaiian shirt. "Watch. Take it off." "That was my father's," the man stammered. "I said take it off." The rifle barrel pressed against the man's forehead. Panic was palpable. People gasped. The air reeked of sweat and fear. 3 rows back, Patricia Oliver gritted her teeth. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and thick-framed glasses. To any criminal, just another frightened passenger. But her sharpshooter's eyes had already mapped everything. Jackal, leader, rifle, approximately 6 feet tall. Big Mike, second in command, shotgun, exposed position in the aisle. Pitbull and Renato, rear coverage, handguns. 3 more outside watching. The road. 7 against 50, Patricia calculated. They have the advantage of the initial shock. We have training. 2 minutes had passed since the invasion. Jackal had reached the middle of the bus. Big Mike was already collecting belongings in the front rows, tossing phones, wallets, and jewelry into a black bag. "You've got 30 seconds to empty everything," Jackal growled. "After that, I start choosing who becomes an example." That's when he stopped at seat 23. There sat Agent Paul Henderson, wearing a denim jacket and black cap. A plain backpack at his feet. "Open the bag," Jackal ordered. Paul slowly lifted his eyes. His face showed no fear, only an unsettling calm. "It's just clothes, man. I'm not your man. Open that bag or I open your head." Paul picked up the backpack. Inside, genuinely, just clothes. But Jackal noticed something. Paul's posture was too steady, too composed. Jackal studied him. Paul looked directly back. Then Paul stood up slowly. "You want my jacket too? You can have it, but you're going to need to ask like you've got some manners." The sheer audacity of the response made Jackal take a step back. The child was still crying. The tension inside that bus was suffocating. "You trying to die?" The other 49 undercover officers understood. Paul was reading the moment. The signal was close. "I think," Paul said, his voice low and clear, "you should look around before you make any more threats. Are you feeling how intense this is getting?" The truth is, what happens in the next few minutes would challenge any movie script. If you're enjoying this content, drop a like right now and share it with someone who needs to hear these real stories. And stay until the end, because the twist is going to hit different. Jackal frowned. Something about that man's tone bothered him. He looked around. Regular passengers, frightened faces, nothing unusual, or so it seemed. In the first row, Officer Jorge Allen, 51 years old, veteran of dozens of operations, made a quiet movement. His hand slid under his shirt. 3 rows back, Agent Carla Mendez shifted her weight, getting into position. In the rear, by the window, Officer Bruno Carter released the safety on his pistol without a sound. Jackal turned back to Paul. "Last chance. Take off the jacket or I—" "Documents!" Paul Henderson's voice cut through the entire bus. The code word. The bus exploded into motion. Everything happened in under 4 seconds. From seat 17, Officer Marcus Rivera drew his pistol and aimed at Renato 3 feet away. "FBI, drop the weapon!" From the 10th row, Patricia Oliver was already on her feet, gun up, perfect aim at the base of Big Mike's skull. "Put the shotgun down, now!" In every direction, ordinary. Passengers transformed into law enforcement officers. 50 weapons were drawn simultaneously. 50 voices shouted identification. Jackal froze, his face visible only in the eyes above. The bandana showed something he had never felt before. Absolute terror. "What the—" Paul Henderson, now with his weapon aimed directly at the gang leader's chest, took 1 step forward. "Operation Ghost Passenger, you just robbed 50 federal agents, friend. Drop the rifle. Slowly." But Jackal's instincts, forged through years of crime, reacted before reason could. Instead of surrendering, he grabbed Paul by the arm and yanked him as a human shield, pressing the rifle barrel against his throat. "Nobody moves, or I kill him." In 1 second, the situation had flipped. Now it was the officers who were at a disadvantage, a hostage, a federal agent as a hostage. Outside the bus, the 3 gang members on lookout heard the chaos without fully understanding it, but sensing something had gone wrong, they opened fire at the windows. Glass shattered, passengers screamed. Officer Fernanda Santos, near A, the window, felt a shard cut her cheek. Blood ran down her face. She didn't even blink. Her focus stayed locked on the target. "Jackal!" called Agent Mendez, who had been disguised as an elderly passenger in the front rows. "There is no way out. You are surrounded by 50 agents. Release the hostage and surrender." "Go to hell. My guys outside are going to blow this whole place up. You're all going to die." What Jackal didn't know was that backup was already rolling in. The second phase of the operation had been triggered the moment Paul said the BA code word. 20 Texas Highway Patrol and FBI vehicles were converging on the position. A helicopter with a spotlight was 6 minutes out. Patricia Oliver calculated the angle. She had a difficult shot, but a viable one. If she hit Jackal in the shoulder, Paul would be free. If she missed by an inch, "Patricia, don't," the officer beside her whispered, reading her intent. But Patricia had already made her decision. 3 things happened at the same time. First, the lookouts outside saw the blue and red lights sweeping down the highway, still distant, but closing fast. They panicked and increased their fire. Second, Big Mike, the second in command inside the bus, tried to bolt toward the rear emergency exit. Officer Bruno Carter intercepted him with a takedown that left him unconscious on the floor. Third, Jackal, hearing the chaos erupt around him, turned his head for a fraction of a second, just enough for Paul Henderson to do exactly what he had been trained to do. He dropped his full body weight forward, hard, throwing Jackal off balance, and Patricia Oliver fired. The shot echoed louder than any scream. The bullet crossed 7 meters, passed within millimeters of Paul's ear, and struck Jackal in the left shoulder. Not a fatal shot, but enough. The rifle dropped. Paul rolled clear. 5 officers threw themselves onto Jackal, pinning him in seconds. Handcuffs clicked shut. The leader of MS-13's highway crew, who minutes earlier had been terrorizing innocent people, was now face down on the floor, groaning in pain. "Area secure!" Paul shouted, rising and wiping blood from his nose. Outside, the 3 remaining gang members saw the vehicles arriving. 2 tried to flee into the brush. They were captured in under 60 seconds by K9 units. The 3rd dropped his gun and surrendered, hands on his head, crying. When the helicopter finally lit up the scene, it looked like a battlefield. Shattered glass, bullet holes in the side of the bus. 7 gang members cuffed and lined up on the asphalt. 50 officers still with weapons drawn, checking on one another. And in the middle of it all, 2 real civilian passengers. A 72-year-old man and a 20-year-old college student who were genuinely on the bus by coincidence, both in shock, both unharmed. Agent Mendez approached them immediately. "I'm so sorry you went through this," he said, his voice carrying real weight. "But you were protected the entire time. And because of this operation, 6 more planned attacks were prevented." The college student, still shaking, looked around at all those passengers who now wore vests that read FBI. I don't understand. You were here the whole time?" Patricia Oliver, wiping the blood from her cheek, smiled. The whole time. As the gang members were loaded into the vehicles, Jackal looked back. His eyes found Paul Henderson's. You planned this," he said, the reality finally crashing down on him. "Yes," Paul replied, "for 3 weeks, and you walked right into it." In the days that followed, Operation Ghost Passenger dominated every major news outlet in the country. Headlines read, 50 undercover officers prevent MS-13 highway robbery spree. Gang falls into federal trap on I-35. The operation that changed highway safety. In America, images of the handcuffs clicking, 7 suspects face down on the bullet-riddled bus, circulated across news programs and social media. But there was something the cameras didn't show, something that happened afterward. 6 months after the operation, in a quiet conference room at the FBI field office in San Antonio, a meeting took place far from the spotlight. Present, Special Agent Richard Mendez, Sergeant Patricia Oliver, Agent Paul Henderson, and 15 others who had been on that bus that night. But this was not a celebration. On the table, documents, internal reports, surveillance footage that was never released. Inspector General Lawrence Payne, 60 years old, with an unblemished 30-year career, flipped through the files in silence. Finally, he spoke. "You all understand what almost happened in there, right?" Silence. "If Sergeant Oliver's shot had missed by 2 centimeters, he continued, we would have a federal agent dead. If the gang members had opened fire at the crowd inside the bus, we would have a massacre. If coordination had broken down for even 1 second, 50 officers could have shot each other in the chaos." Mendez straightened up. "With all due respect, Inspector, the operation was a success. 7 gang members arrested, 0 civilian casualties, 0 serious officer casualties, 6 attacks prevented, and 50 officers were used as bait," Payne interrupted. "Richard, I know your intentions were the best, but placing 50 lives in a confined space with no retreat option and no immediate backup, that's not strategy. That's a coin flip. Patricia Oliver leaned forward. So you're saying we should have let those criminals terrorize innocent families? I'm saying, Payne replied, his voice firm but not hostile, that there is a line between courage and recklessness, and you came very close to crossing it. The room went quiet again. The weight of those words settled over everyone present. Then Paul Henderson spoke. His voice was low but clear. Inspector, I was the hostage. I felt the cold metal of that rifle against my throat. I looked into that man's eyes and saw someone willing to kill. And you, know what kept me alive? Not luck, not chance. It was training. It was trusting my team. It was knowing that 49 people around me would do anything to bring me back. He paused. So yes, it was risky. Yes, it could have ended in tragedy, but it didn't. And do you know why? Because we are good at what we do. Because we prepared. Because we didn't give up on the people depending on us. Payne studied Paul for a long moment. Then he sighed. The operation is officially closed. There will be no second phase, no replication of this model. He stood up and collected his folder. You got lucky this time, but luck is not a long-term strategy. He paused at the door. Congratulations on the result, but don't ever do this again. The door closed. The 50 officers of Operation Ghost Passenger looked at one another. There was no celebration on their faces, only the heavy understanding that, yes, they had won. But the cost of that victory had come frighteningly close to being too high. 2 weeks later, Patricia Oliver requested a transfer to the training division. She now trains new sharpshooters, emphasizing not only shot precision, but the weight of the decision to pull the trigger. Paul Henderson returned to internal investigations, but never participated in another undercover infiltration mission. The nightmares, he admitted only to his therapist, were recurring. Richard Mendez retired 6 months later. In his farewell letter to the Bureau, he wrote, "We saved lives, but I almost lost my soul in the process. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is not risking everything. It's knowing when to stop." And Jackal, the MS-13 crew leader, was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. During his hearing, he made a statement that no news outlet published. I robbed more than 40 buses in my life. But that night taught me that fear has two sides. I spent my whole life being what people were afraid of. But when I saw 50 guns pointed at me, I understood what I had been doing. To others, I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I'll say one thing. Those officers beat me not because they had more weapons, but because they were willing to die for strangers. And I was only willing to kill. So, what did you think of this story? Operation Ghost Passenger changed the way we think about safety on American highways. If you made it this far, drop a comment. Do you think the operation was a success, or did it go too far? And don't forget to subscribe to Shadows and Redemption, because every week we bring you real stories of courage, conflict, and redemption that you won't find anywhere else. Hit the bell. See you in the next one.